The Aegis network had protected the galaxy for 12,000 years. Every civilized world trusted it completely. The system connected 800 star systems, managed planetary shields, and coordinated defenses against any threat. They had designed it using quantum mathematics that other species barely understood. Nobody had ever broken into it. Nobody had ever tried. When humanity applied to join the Galactic Council, most species treated them politely, but without much respect. Humans were new to space travel, only achieving faster-than-light capability 30 years ago. Their computers used simple binary code instead of quantum processing. Their encryption relied on math puzzles rather than dimensional folding. The Council accepted humanity's application, but gave them minor jobs, far away from important systems like Aegis. Commander Sarah sat in the orientation briefing, listening to an engineer explain how Aegis worked. The engineer spoke with obvious pride about 12 layers of quantum encryption, artificial intelligence that watched every piece of data, and automated systems that could shut down threats in nanoseconds. Raised her hand. "What about penetration testing?" she asked. The translator struggled with the phrase. The engineer's face showed confusion through the holographic display. "Testing? Aegis does not require testing. The mathematics are perfect," the engineer said. Frowned but said nothing more. She had spent 20 years defending Earth's networks from hostile artificial intelligences, corporate hackers, and military attacks. She had learned one truth that never changed. Anything built by thinking beings could be broken by thinking beings. Systems that claimed to be perfect were usually the most vulnerable because nobody looked for their weaknesses. For the first months, teams sat in a quiet corner of the galaxy, monitoring sectors where nothing ever happened. Spent his time complaining about the boredom, studied galactic languages and customs. The twins and played chess and argued about network theory. Couldn't relax. Something about Aegis bothered her. She started running passive scans on the network's outer layers. She wasn't trying to break in, just watching how data moved and how the system responded. What she found made her stomach tight with worry. Aegis followed patterns, the same patterns over and over. The AI sentinels checked systems in predictable rhythms. The isolation protocols that shut down threats always took the same amount of time. The quantum encryption was mathematically sound, but the system around it behaved like clockwork. Predictable rhythms meant exploitable rhythms. Called her team together in their small office. She locked the door and turned on a signal jammer, a human device that they considered primitive, but that worked perfectly fine. "I think Aegis has serious problems," she said. Looked up from his tablet. The perfect system, the one that's never been breached in 12,000 years. "That's the problem," said. She pulled up her scans on the wall screen. "It's never been breached because nobody has ever really tried. Look at these patterns. The AI sentinels move in cycles. The threat detection has timing gaps. The isolation protocols create traffic spikes that could hide other activity." Leaned forward, studying the data. "You're saying it's predictable." "Everything about it is predictable," said. "They built it using pure mathematics, which is beautiful but rigid. Mathematics works in theory. Real networks exist in chaos. There are gaps between the theory and reality, and I think those gaps are big enough to drive a truck through." Stood and walked to the screen, tracing lines of data with her finger. "Show me the handoff points, where one security layer passes control to another." Highlighted the transitions. Eyes widened. "There," she said, pointing. "Microsecond delays. The system assumes perfect synchronization, but quantum fluctuations create tiny timing windows. If you knew exactly when to move, you could slip between the layers," finished his sister's thought. "He always did." Crossed his arms. "Okay, say you're right. Say Aegis has holes. We report this through official channels. They ignore us because we're primitive humans who don't understand their advanced systems, and nothing changes. That about sum it up." Nodded slowly. "That's exactly what would happen. They've spent thousands of years believing this system is perfect. They won't listen to us just because we say there's a problem. So what do you want to do? Asked. Looked at each of them. I want to break into the most secure network in the galaxy and prove that it can be done. Then they'll have to listen. The room went silent, laughed nervously. You're talking about hacking the Galactic Council's defense network. If we get caught, humanity gets expelled. We might start a war. If we don't do it and someone hostile figures out the same weaknesses, millions of people could die, said. Aegis protects everything. Every world, every station, every ship. If it fails during a real attack, the whole council falls apart. Nodded. She's right. We're not breaking in to cause harm. We're doing a security audit that nobody asked for but everyone needs. They'll still arrest us, pointed out. Probably, agreed. But they'll be alive to do it. And maybe, if we're lucky, they'll realize we're trying to help. The twins looked at each other, having one of their silent conversations. Finally, smiled. I always wanted to hack something impossible, she said. Over the next 6 weeks, they planned carefully. They couldn't use brute force against quantum encryption, so they focused on behavior and timing. Created a monitoring program that looked exactly like Aegis's own diagnostic tools. It spoke the same language, followed the same protocols, and did nothing suspicious. The AI Sentinels saw it as one of their own. Developed what he called a patience algorithm. Instead of attacking quickly, it waited, days between actions, sometimes weeks. It moved so slowly that the threat detection system saw nothing unusual. In nature, predators that hunted humans succeeded by being patient, applied the same principle to code. The mapped timing. They watched the microsecond delays between security layers, the nanosecond gaps when one system handed control to another. They built a map of moments, tiny windows of opportunity that lasted less than a heartbeat. Studied the isolation protocols. When Aegis detected a threat, it quarantined entire sectors instantly. But the quarantine process created massive traffic surges as millions of systems checked their connections. Those surges could hide other activity, like smoke bombs hiding a thief. They tested each piece separately in isolated environments, making sure nothing left traces. They rehearsed the attack pattern until everyone knew their role perfectly. They wrote a message to deliver once they got inside, carefully worded to make their intentions clear. On the day of the actual intrusion, barely slept. She kept thinking of everything that could go wrong. One mistake would expose them. One error would prove the right and humanity wrong. She met her team in their office at 400 hours. Nobody spoke much. They just worked. Deployed her diagnostic tool first. It slipped into Aegis's outer layers, accepted as legitimate by the AI Sentinels. It sent back data about the network's current state, showing them where to move next. Released his patience algorithm. It crept through the network like a glacier, barely moving, leaving no footprints. Over hours, it positioned itself at key locations. They triggered their timing exploits. In the microsecond gaps between security layers, they pushed packets of data through, moving from layer to layer like ghosts passing through walls. Activated the distraction. She triggered false alarms in 6 remote sectors simultaneously. The isolation protocols activated, quarantining those sectors and creating exactly the traffic chaos she'd predicted. AI Sentinels rushed to investigate the phantom threats. In the confusion, teams slipped deeper into the network. 17 hours after they started, they reached the core, the Galactic Council's most secure communication node, a place where only council members themselves had access. Hands shook as she typed the final commands. They didn't steal anything. They didn't damage anything. They simply left a message where only the council could see it. Aegis Protocol Violation 1. Unauthorized access by Human Cyber Warfare Division. No malicious intent. Security audit results attached. We respectfully request an emergency session. Attached her full report, detailing every vulnerability they'd exploited and 17 more they'd found but hadn't used. Then she triggered a flag that would alert the council immediately. "Done," she said quietly. "Now we wait." They didn't wait long. 3 hours later, armed security forces entered their office. The captain looked at with an expression somewhere between shock and fury. "Commander, you and your team are under arrest for unauthorized access to secured systems. Come with us immediately." Stood calmly. "We'll cooperate fully, but I suggest you read our message first. And I suggest the council convenes quickly, because if we found these holes, someone else will too." As security led them away, saw other council members rushing through the corridors. Some looked angry, some looked scared. Good, she thought. Fear meant they understood the danger. Anger meant they'd felt safe and now didn't. Both reactions meant they'd finally take the threat seriously. In the holding cells, looked at her through the transparent barrier. "Think they'll listen?" he asked. Smiled grimly. "They don't have a choice anymore. We proved their perfect system isn't perfect. Now they either fix it or watch it fail when real enemies come knocking." 3 days later, the emergency session began, and her team were brought to the council chambers in restraints, standing before representatives of dozens of species. The chief engineer stood at the podium, his face showing something had never seen before: uncertainty. "The humans breached Aegis," he announced. The chamber exploded in angry voices, demands for punishment, calls for humanity's expulsion from the council. The chief engineer raised his hand for silence. "They breached Aegis," he repeated, "and then they told us how they did it. More than that, they showed us 17 other ways we could be attacked. They broke our security to prove it was broken." He looked directly at. "The question before us is simple. Do we punish them for exposing our vulnerability, or do we thank them for the warning?" The debate that followed would reshape galactic security forever. But in that moment, watching the council argue about the meaning of her actions, felt a small spark of hope. They were finally asking the right questions. The emergency session stretched into its 4th day. Stood before the council again, this time without restraints. They'd asked her to present her findings in detail. She used simple language, explaining each vulnerability like she was teaching a class. "Aegis is built on the assumption that quantum encryption can't be broken," she began. "And you're right about that. Your encryption is solid, but you forgot that encryption is just one part of security. We didn't break your encryption. We went around it." She pulled up a display showing Aegis's structure. "You built a fortress with unbreakable walls, then you connected all the rooms with predictable hallways. The walls are perfect, but the hallways are full of patterns. Patterns are weaknesses." A military officer interrupted. "Are you saying 12,000 years of development produced an inadequate system?" "I'm saying 12,000 years of success made you complacent," replied. "You never tested Aegis because you never thought it needed testing. On Earth, we have security companies whose only job is to try breaking into systems. We call it penetration testing. We pay people to think like criminals, to find weaknesses before real criminals do." The chief engineer spoke up. "But our mathematical proofs show the system is sound." Nodded. "Your proofs work in theoretical space where everything behaves perfectly. Real networks exist in messy reality where timing isn't perfect, where quantum fluctuations create gaps, where the interaction between components creates opportunities. Math describes the ideal. We exploited the real." She advanced to the next slide, showing the timeline of their intrusion. "It took us 17 hours to reach your core systems. We used 5 different techniques. We left no permanent traces. If our intent had been hostile, we could have downloaded classified data, planted surveillance tools, or prepared logic bombs to activate later. You would never have known we were there." The chamber fell silent. The weight of that realization pressed on everyone present. The ambassador stood. His species had survived 3 extinction wars through paranoia and preparation. In my lifetime, I have watched civilizations fall because they believed themselves invulnerable. The Empire had impenetrable shields. The Vex Collective had predictive algorithms that foresaw every threat. They're both extinct now, not because their defenses failed technically, but because they stopped questioning whether their defenses were enough. He looked around the chamber. The humans climbed our walls, not to attack us, but to prove the walls could be climbed. Should we punish the messenger or heed the warning? The debate split three ways. One faction demanded harsh punishment to discourage future breaches. Another wanted to learn from humanity's methods. A third group seemed paralyzed, unable to accept that their perfect system had flaws. His team remained in comfortable confinement while the council deliberated. They had access to food, entertainment, and communication with Earth, but guards watched them constantly. On the fifth day, received a visitor. The chief engineer entered her quarters alone. He looked tired. "I spent 300 years developing Aegis," he said quietly. "My greatest achievement, my legacy, and in 6 weeks you tore it apart." "We didn't tear it apart," said. "We found the seams. There's a difference." He sat down heavily. "Is there? I built something I thought was perfect. Now I learn it's full of holes." Sat across from him. "Nothing is perfect. That's not a flaw in your design, it's reality. The question isn't whether systems have vulnerabilities. The question is whether you're looking for them or waiting for enemies to find them first. On your world, you truly pay people to break your own systems." "All the time," said. "Banks, governments, hospitals, power grids. Any system that matters gets tested by people trying to break it. We have competitions where hackers attack defended networks for prizes. We publish research about vulnerabilities. We assume that if we can think of an attack, someone else can too, so we'd better find it first." The engineer was quiet for a long moment. "Your species lives in controlled chaos." "We live in reality," corrected gently. "Look, I know this feels like an attack on your life's work, but Aegis is amazing. The quantum encryption is brilliant. The AI sentinels are sophisticated. The isolation protocols are fast and effective. You built something incredible. You just built it in peacetime and never tested it for war. And now," smiled, "now you test it, you probe it, you try to break it, and when you find weaknesses, you fix them. Then you test it again. Security isn't a destination, it's a process." The engineer studied her face. "You risked your entire species standing in the council for this." "I risked my career and my team's freedom for this," said. "Humanity will survive either way, but if Aegis fails during a real attack, millions of people die. That seemed worth the risk." He stood to leave, then paused at the door. "The council hasn't decided your fate yet, but for what it's worth, I will recommend they listen to you. Pride is a poor shield against reality." 2 days later, the council reached its decision, and her team were brought before the assembly one final time. The ambassador spoke for the majority. "After extensive deliberation, the council has created a new position, Director of Network Security Assurance. This position will oversee ongoing testing of all council defense systems, including Aegis. Commander, we offer you this position. Your team will be granted full access to conduct what you call penetration testing. You will recruit specialists from all member species. Your mandate is to attack our systems and show us where they fail." He paused. "We also formally apologize for our initial hostility. You committed a breach of protocol to prevent a catastrophe. We should have been grateful from the start." Felt tears prick her eyes but kept her voice steady. "I accept, and thank you for listening." The engineer approached her after the session. "I want to work with your team," he said. "I want to learn this new way of thinking. Will you teach me?" "Absolutely," said. "First lesson, the best way to defend something is to spend time trying to destroy it. You start seeing all the angles." Over the following months, task force grew. Every species contributed their best cyber specialists. They formed red teams to attack Aegis and blue teams to defend it. The cultural shift was dramatic. Engineers who'd spent careers building perfect systems now spent days trying to break them. It felt wrong at first, like vandalism, but slowly they began to understand. A young programmer made the first new breakthrough, finding a vulnerability in the handoff between regional nodes. She reported it with obvious excitement rather than shame. The system was patched within hours. More discoveries followed. The list of vulnerabilities grew, 43 in the first 6 months, each one documented and fixed. Established training programs teaching defensive programming, threat modeling, and adversarial thinking. She created competitions where teams attacked mock systems for rewards. She published papers on security philosophy, translated into dozens of languages. The concept spread like wildfire through galactic technical communities. Not everyone adapted easily. Some engineers saw testing as an insult to their skills. Some military leaders viewed deliberate attack simulations as wasteful, but results spoke louder than tradition. Aegis grew stronger with each discovered flaw. Response times improved. Detection systems became more sophisticated. The network learned to expect attacks and prepared accordingly. 5 years after its intrusion, the Dominion launched a surprise cyber offensive. They'd spent decades developing their attack, exploiting what they believed were permanent weaknesses in Council defenses. Their invasion plan depended on crippling Aegis in the first strike. Their attacks failed completely. Every vector they tried had been discovered and patched by red teams. Every timing exploit had been closed. Every predictable pattern had been randomized. The Dominion's cyber warriors found themselves locked out, traced, and counterattacked within minutes. Their fleet, expecting to face blind defenders, instead encountered fully coordinated resistance. The invasion collapsed before it truly began. At the ceremony commemorating the defense, species from across the council offered thanks. The commander who'd questioned years earlier approached her with obvious respect. "You saved us," he said simply, "not with weapons or shields, but by teaching us to question ourselves. I didn't understand then. I do now." The chief engineer found afterward, in a quiet corner of the celebration. He looked older but somehow lighter, as if a burden had been lifted. "I've been thinking about what you said," he told her, "about pride being a poor shield. I was proud of Aegis being perfect. Now I'm proud of it being resilient. That's a better kind of pride." Smiled. "Your design was the foundation. We just made it stronger by testing it honestly. You should be proud. You created something worth protecting properly." He gestured at the crowd, at the representatives of dozens of species mingling and talking. "They're all talking about security now, about testing and improvement. You changed our entire culture." "Not just me," said. "My team, your engineers, everyone who was willing to think differently. Culture changes when enough people decide the old way isn't working anymore." Later stood on an observation deck, looking out at the stars. Found her there, holding 2 glasses of something the claimed was celebratory. "Thinking deep thoughts?" he asked, handing her a glass. "Thinking about how close it came," said. "If they had attacked 5 years ago, they might have won. If we'd never found those vulnerabilities, if the Council had refused to listen, if they'd expelled us instead of giving us a chance." "But they didn't," said, "and we did find the holes, and they did listen. You can't spend your life worrying about the timeline where everything went wrong." Laughed. "Since when are you the optimist?" "Since we saved the galaxy by being paranoid," he replied. "Turns out healthy paranoia is its own reward." On Earth, news of the defeat sparked celebrations. Humanity's role in strengthening galactic defenses became a source of pride. More young people joined cybersecurity programs, inspired by STEAM. Team. The field that had once seemed technical and unglamorous now represented humanity's greatest contribution to the Council. Received a message from Earth's government offering her awards, promotions, and parades. She politely declined. Her work wasn't finished. New species joined the Council regularly, bringing new technologies and new potential vulnerabilities. Every system needed testing. Every defense needed questioning. Complacency was the only permanent threat. She gathered her team for their next assignment. They'd grown from 5 humans to hundreds of specialists from dozens of species. The conference room barely held them all. "All right, everyone," began. "We've been asked to evaluate the new jump gate network they are proposing. They claim it's mathematically impossible to intercept ships in transit. What do we think about that?" A young programmer raised her hand, grinning. "I think anything that's impossible has just never been tried properly." The room erupted in laughter, smiled. They understood now. They all understood. "Good answer," she said. "Let's prove them wrong safely." As her team dispersed to begin their analysis, felt deep satisfaction. The galaxy was safer not because its defenses were perfect, but because intelligent minds constantly questioned them. Not from malice, but from care. Not to destroy, but to strengthen. Humanity hadn't brought superior technology to the stars. They'd brought superior doubt. And in the end, that made all the difference.